Hello, everybody. Can you hear us? Give us some llama, llama, llama in the feedback if you can hear us. If not, Hooray. Thank goodness. Okay, everybody, I apologize. This is my first live demo, and there were some glitches. So I'm flying solo, but I have Toby here with me today, and we're gonna take a couple deep breaths, cruise right through. This is all supposed to be very chill, tiny bit of stress. We're okay. Toby's here. Toby is going to get us started. We're going to jump right in. I'm going to pop in and out a little bit, drop in some social media information, remind everybody to subscribe to the YouTube channel because that's where all the magic happens. And we've all been waiting. I'm just going to hand you right over to Toby because Toby knows what he's doing.
Well, maybe, hopefully. So, hi everyone, sorry for the wait. What have you got? Have you got my face or the art at the moment, or both?
I have your face. Do you want the art up?
Let's do the art. Yeah,
Okay. We're going right to the art, folks. There we go.
So yeah, my Instagram name is Toby Urban Sketch because I like the urban sketch style, which is sort of pink and loose and splashy colours. This is one from yesterday I did, which is a local church, local to my family home. And it's just a good idea of the kind of style. This took longer than an hour, but the kind of thing that I go for. And I got just a couple more examples. So this is another one which is a bit longer, and it's again like lots of splashy, loose colours and lots of white space. Occasionally do something portrait, same idea. And then this is a sort of example of what we might try and do today. So this took me about 45 minutes. So hopefully we can make something a bit like this in the live demo. I think I was supposed to be talking about how I plan my sketches as well. So the other thing I would do, I think everyone's got the reference photo. The first thing I'll do when I'm planning is a really, rough sketch of the big shapes, and then just working out which colors work together. So that's what I've done here. So that's my first stage of planning, and I'll talk you through the colors I'm using as we go. So I guess we just get on with it. Is that all right, Clara?
Yep, let's jump right in.
So this is just an A4 piece of cold press watercolor paper. It's 300 grams, I think it's 140 pounds. So it can take enough water that we can just do whatever we want, really. The first thing I try and do is pick out where the focal point is going to be. And so there's this idea of splitting the page into a loose grid like that, and then getting your focal point somewhere on one of these points. So if we take our image here, I'm just going to start by sketching the front of the cafe, or the upper stories of the cafe. Just putting a loose rectangle, and then the base coming down to there. And then we can build everything else off of this shape. So it's a long building just coming down, going up. And it doesn't matter all this like loose pencil marks, because we'll go over them with pen. We might rub some out, we might not, but by the end you won't be able to see much of them. So just sort of building in a bit of the distance there. And then the next side of the cafe. And there's a few buildings just going off into the distance, and just give them a little bit of interest by changing the angles of the roofs and things like that. You might make this thing this edge down a bit. These all got a bit short, so that's why I've lengthened the cafe here. All right. The other thing we've got is a big tree and quite a fun post box. It's just marking about where that will go. And that's about where the big tree is, and a few little trees coming forwards. There's a couple of things in the foreground that I definitely want to include. So there's a lamppost. The lamppost is actually here in the image, but that gets in the way of our focal point. So I'm going to move it slightly to the side. Bring it down. And where that comes down will mark the edge of the pavement, which we can bring in. I always like in scenes like this, I like bringing in sort of colourful signs. So at the edge, we've got a stop sign. So that's going to just sort of loom in from the side. I think when I first met Tara, she said she liked that I included cars. And I said, I hate drawing cars. But
it was a nice touch. Nobody does those little things, but you don't like them, so I don't want you to do them.
Well, I'm going to do one for you. So there's a little rough car going to come in at the edge here. Cool. So I think that's probably enough of our sketch. So you can see really, really loose, or the initial sketch. So one more thing I always do pencil. I find that if I just go straight in with a pen, I often get the proportions a bit wrong. So in this building, we've got 4 stories. So I'm just going to mark out where they are. And just try and get the perspective right as we go out. And this building is also sort of divided into discrete segments. And we're not too fussed about getting anything precise or exact. It's more about having a feel for it and enjoying the process more than anything. I'm just loosely marking where the window is going to be. And so as we get further and further from our focal point, the precision, the detail, later the color gets less and less. So we don't need to be really precise about these windows either.
So I'm just going to drop into the chat just some info about our free online demos. They happen mostly Sundays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. You can subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications to stay up to date. I know I do that, and 9 out of 10 times when I log into my laptop, it gives me an alert that I've got some Etcher events to watch. And just a list of a couple of the upcoming live demos. So I'm going to send that off to everybody.
So all I'm doing here is just adding a few of the details that I want to try and remember when I come in with the pen. And then getting these windows at the top, the roof line, just where the chimneys will go. A few more windows here. Okay, so I think that's probably enough of a pencil sketch. So I use fountain pens for my pen. I've got a few of different sizes. This one's a medium nib. We might use that at the end. The reason I like them, you can use them that way around, upside down gives you much finer line. You can also get much more variation in the line, so you can get pooling of ink and things like that. and they're flexible. So sometimes I use fine liners. I've got a few especially different tones, so lighter colors, but I tend to do most of my stuff with fountain pens. And this is just a platinum preppy. It's a really cheap fountain pen, but it's plenty good enough. This is a Lippmann, which is more commonly used, but water, sort of the permanent inks you get, which don't wash away, tend to damage fountain pens a bit. So it's not great to have really expensive pens, I find. So
Do you have an ink you prefer?
I do.
Waterproof.
It's this one. So I don't know if you can read that, carbon ink. It's sort of granular. So if you do wash it straight away, you can see all the granules, but it's a really good permanent ink. I can only get it on Amazon. So I'm not sure where else you can get it. So what I'm doing now is starting the pen work and starting with the focal point, because that's where you want most of the detail. And we're going to add in a few of the interesting things now that we've got the pen, like these little, I'm not sure what to call them actually. We'll call them features. And just starting to give stuff a bit more shape. So all these divisions, you can see the underside of them. So we just put in a couple of lines, which give us that shape at the beginning. Doing the same all the way up. I'm going to put this sign in, the Tutti sign. Because it sits in front of a lot of the other features.
I'm dropping in a link for the Etcher website. You can get all your supplies there, and you can sign up for classes and follow everything that we continue to do. There are some new supplies now. There are gouache brushes, fluorescent watercolors, golden watercolors, portrait sketchbooks, and accordion sketchbooks. There's a lot available and a lot more happening too.
So as you can see, I don't stick to my exact pencil marks. They're just guidelines, and I definitely add in more details. So we got this fun sign at the beginning, which I didn't sketch in. And you don't want to spend too long in any one area because it's easy to overdo. You can always come back and add more, but you can't really take away ink.
That's what makes it even better, those little honest imperfections.
It is, and they really don't matter either. You don't even see them. So these lines are wonky, but by the end, they will all just sort of, well, hopefully it will all just fit together. And you just don't notice. And if you do go completely wrong, you just go over it and make a feature out of it.
So we have a question about your work. Is it on site or is it photos taken from adventures? We'll call them adventures.
I like to consider myself a plein air artist. That's what urban sketching is supposed to be. But for the last year with coronavirus, I have maybe been out to do it once or twice. And then when things opened up in Britain, it was a bit chilly, so I still was inside. So I'm hoping that I can go out again. But at the moment, it's all from photos, to be honest.
And what kind of paper are you using today?
Today, I'm using just some Casa cold press watercolor paper. You can get it in sheets of 50, and so it's really economical. If I'm doing something slower, like so this thing, which I took a lot more care over in that sense, I tend to paint on the block. So I love this paper. The advantage is you don't have to worry about the masking tape ruining it at the end. And also because I like painting outside in theory, you can just carry that block with you. It's all stretched, it's all ready to go. But also if you're just doing loads of sketches like this one, you don't want to be spending loads and loads of money on expensive paper all the time. So I'm just going to start adding in a few details. And again, trying to get a bit of shape. So just giving this 3D effect to the frame and little bits of shadow on these supporting bits.
Okay, and I'm going to put in our feedback survey in the feed here. Feel free to take 2 to 3 minutes. It's anonymous. We'd love your feedback. And again, I truly apologize for the tech issues. That was 100% me. Toby was waiting very patiently.
It was a nice, relaxing experience.
I'm enjoying the process. It's very, very calming.
Well,
Toby, do you
yeah.
know the watercolor paper? Do you remember the
Yeah.
weight on that? I have the same paper. I don't have my pad near me though.
I think the stuff I'm using.
It was the Winsor Newton weight.
Oh, that's I think it's 300 grams or 140 pounds.
I would have been right, but I didn't want to make that mistake.
I do, whatever paper I use, I do tend to use that weight, because if you don't, it just buckles and you lose a lot of ability to just play with the colors, move the colors around, or make mistakes and layer on more color to cover it up or whatever. And I think you can't get as much pigment down as well, so you end up with something which isn't quite as vibrant or interesting, in my opinion at least. With all these windows in the actual image, they're curved, but it's very difficult to draw an accurate, well, for me to draw an accurate curve. So one way I get around this is by making them angular. The same when we get to these trees and things. I just purposely decide it's going to be a different shape. So this is where we get, if we consider our focal points to probably be here and here, as we get further towards this edge, I'm going to put less and less precision or detail into these windows. And the same with the color when we get there.
Question about cold press and fountain pens. Do you find that it's rough on the nibs?
No more than, in terms of like actually getting a smooth line, no more than with a fine liner. In terms of damaging the nib, I've not found that problem, but I have loads and loads of fountain pens, and I use them. They're all these quite cheap ones, and so it's not something I worry about really. I think the ink does more damage to them, to be honest.
Agreed 100% on that. Yes. Is there a particular brand of fountain pen that you tend to go to? Purchase more frequently?
So the Platinum Preppy, it's a Japanese brand. They've got 3 or 4 different thicknesses of nib. They are absolutely fine, really nice quality actually, and they cost in pounds like £3 or £4. And they have these, they have lots of converters as well as having the carbon ink, which fits this particular pen in a cartridge if you don't like having the converters to suck it up.
You use the converters.
I use the converters because it just seems A, cheaper, and B, nicer for the environment than lots of plastic. And one of those, the bottles of ink will last a long time and cost as much as maybe 8 or 9 cartridges.
Yes.
So I'm still trying to move around and just keep things joined up, but not spend too long getting too invested in details. So part of my process, I'll go back at the end, assuming we have time, to add a bit more ink, so we can always add more details. And this is just about giving us a foundation on which to play with the colours. So whenever I get to a foreground detail, instead of trying to paint the background behind it, I will try and pop it in. And then continue to add the background details. As cooling effects like this, I don't know how well it comes up in the video, but that's what you can do with a fountain pen, which you can't as easily do with a just a fine liner.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're light and they're easy to roll, and it doesn't catch as much.
Hmm. So now that we're further away, to do the inner frames, I'm definitely using the sort of the wrong side of the nib, just to give that extra fine appearance.
Oh, Beth must have attended one of Rogine's demos. She's asking about the Sailor Feud pen at a 55-degree angle. Do you ever use those?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, I'll send you a link later. It's very interesting because the nib takes a hard angle.
Okay. No, I've just got the sort of normal, all I've got is different diameters, so I don't know if you can read. That's 0.3. I've got 0.2, and then I've got a medium one, which I think about 0.5. But no, I've never delved into anything sort of more clever or advanced than that. So it's part of my process is, or the timings for it rather. I discovered in practicing for this that I actually spend a lot more time on the ink for something like this than the watercolor, and the watercolor phase can come through actually very quickly and quite effectively. So I'm anticipating the total sketching to take probably 35 to 40 minutes, maybe a bit less. So I've extended the awning there. And when I practiced this for the example image, I didn't particularly like how there was just a bit of dead space there, and I quite like the vibrant green as a sort of symmetrical thing. So I thought, I've not done it yet, but we'll try it like this and see what it looks like. Okay, so this is where we're just going to get these shapes of the trees in, and try and pop a few trunks in the sort of approximately the right perspective. This is really loose, and then having put that in, we can put some of these roofs. In reality, they're quite smooth, but just overlapping them, making them higgledy-piggledy, gives a little bit more interest. There's also some railings going along here, and rather than making a really clean bottom to these distant flats and houses, we're just going to pop in a few railings, because one thing in the image, you can't actually see clearly where the bottom of the houses is, although you might want to think you can. You definitely can't. So don't draw something that you can't necessarily see. I'm just going to move over here.
Do you ever put people in your work?
I do. They're difficult. Distant crowds are quite fun. You just do little shapes. Often like a pub with a couple of people walking again, and you just do an approximate shape. If people ask you to paint something, they often want people in it, and that's probably the most likely scenario where I've actually done a person. They're very difficult to be immediately happy with when drawing in this style, because I don't know, I can never quite get them exactly what I imagine they're going to look like in my head. So if I was drawing people, I would definitely have another piece of paper that before I commit them to this piece of paper, I practice to the side a few times. They just don't come naturally.
So we're starting to get some questions about the mini workshop here. Let me go over this. Mini workshops are 90 minutes. They are $6 for that 90 minutes. This one, Toby's will run on May 12th. Then once it is ready to be released, it usually takes about 3 to 5 days unless there's a problem. Then you have the ability to download it. And it's pretty much yours for forever.
So all I've done here is, this is some really loose outlines of the flats, the end of the road, there's some more flats there. Probably just add the outline to another couple of cars here to give the distance. Put this guy in. And just a suggestion of a little pavement. I like adding, I like my pavements to be quite 3D, at least at the very foreground. So just add in a few lines to give that at least suggestion of shape. All right, it's useful to then step back for a second, just look at what you've done so far, and see where you might need to add a bit more. So we've obviously got this building would be good to add in. Again, using the principle that as we get further away, looser, we don't even need to finish the wall off there. And there's some windows, but fewer and fewer lines. There's the door. I think that'll be enough for there. Antennas are always fun to put in. We've got a few sort of TV aerials, I think they are. And then a couple of little details like chimneys in the distance. Okay, so that's most of the pen work done, I think. I'll then just have a little look around. Do you know how long I've been going, by the way, Tara?
We are, yeah, look at my time now. I would say we started closer to 10:30. So we're gonna keep running. We are at about, we'll say we're 20 minutes in.
Cool. So I got a little bit more time to do some pen, which is
Yes.
nice. So the next sort of level of pen work I often do is adding in sort of the finer details and adding a little bit of shape. I might actually, so I'm going to use the thicker fountain pen and just giving some of these windows a darker edge. Just already adds quite a lot of shape. So I'm also, I already did it here, but it's fun to bring out when there's like a colourful brick pattern or something like that. It's quite fun to add it in quite explicitly in pen. Helps you remember to colour it and to leave it a separate colour than the other things. And then things like street signs as well. There's another one there. And then just also adding, so we know this is all brickwork, but where there's no windows, there's nothing going on, just adding in, going to go back to the finer pen, but just adding in some brick shapes. Giving these a bit of shape again.
So I'm dropping in some information here on how to be eligible for our weekly prizes. So we've changed the program a little. If you tag your work, hashtag Etcher Studio, you are put in the pool for weekly prizes that range anywhere from a free mini workshop to sketchbooks, to mystery prizes, vouchers, you name it, we're trying to do it. Each week is different just to keep you all on your toes. So I'm going to put that in here for everybody and hope to see your work. Plus, we love to see your work.
So I'm just continuing with little bits of detail like getting some texture on the roof. And then just adding some paving slabs. Always gives you that perspective and makes it a little bit more 3D. Okay. Just going to keep going. So I always notice as I come around, I've left obvious things out. So just going back and making sure that these windows all have frames is nice.
Question for, and we're not there yet, but when you paint, do you use black watercolor? Or is it just strictly the ink?
Just the ink. I might use some, I've got Payne's Grey, and I often mix sort of neutrals and got a couple of dark blues and things, but I guess it depends what kind of thing I'm doing as well. So with an urban sketch, which is a quick, expressive, loose thing, then I won't use much dark watercolors. With something which I spend longer, like 3 or 4 hours over, then I might do a lot less pen and a lot more shapes with different colors or different tones of the watercolor. And then I still won't use black, but a Payne's grey or mixing up a dark neutral or a James grey or something like that, I'll often do.
Excellent. Do you ever use any ink other than black?
Only, I've got some greys in fine liners, and they can be fun for adding, if something's got the really obvious brickwork. In fact, I can probably show you, if you can see on this. This is an example where I've done less ink, lots of just shapes of watercolor, but also these grey marks. This is all ink, but from a fine line in here. So I do stuff like that as well. It's good for adding a bit of variation to dry stone walls and old cottages, things like that, where you don't just want a wall of black ink if you're trying to do all the bricks or something. Just trying to see if there's anything obvious I've missed. Since we've got time, I'm going to get rid of some of these pencil marks. I don't think this is strictly necessary. I'm not going to get rid of all of them, but then we can just see if there is anything obvious I've left.
I'm going to drop Toby's Instagram page in here. Please follow him. Inspiring work, fun. Everything is unique and energetic.
There we go. I think tiny bit more detail here. So I can't see anything obvious that I've missed that I really wanted to do. So I think we can move on to some watercolor. So I've got my little crib sheet that I decided were nice colors. And hopefully you can see that. Oh, just about, yeah. Oh, I'm going to move all my other pens and things. So I've got loads of watercolors, and I normally just mix straight from here. I've also got a couple of smaller palettes to, in theory, sketch outside with, because this is quite big to take around. You can probably tell which colours I like from the fact there's 6 blues and I think, no, sorry, 8 blues and 8 browny reds. But we will not use all of them. So I think I mentioned this to you as well last time, Tara, was one of the things I try and keep control of is the number of colours I'm using. And so if I use a blue somewhere, I try and just stick with that blue, maybe another one somewhere. But if you end up trying to get each colour perfect, for me, it ends up a bit muddy or confused. Whereas if you just stick with some simple colour choices, and then if it's not quite right for what it looks like in front of you, you can still make it a fun image. It doesn't have to be the exact colour you see. At least that's my idea. Well, I started mixing brown, but I'm actually going to do the sky first.
And for
So
an urban sketcher, your palette makes sense. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, bright colors and bricks. This is just cobalt blue and loads of water. I'm using a size 14 round brush today. I'm not super fussy. It's just for the sky. It's nice having something quite big, which you can give a real sort of expressive splash around with. So loads of water. Ooh, didn't mean to be that expressive there. So I do try and keep at the beginning a good sort of roof line. It doesn't matter if it bleeds in later, or sometimes you might purposefully get it to bleed around. So I tend to do a few bits, pick up a bit more pigment, and then just drop it in. Bit too much water there, so do it again. So I can then just drop in a bit more pigment, just to give you different textures. Cobalt blue is a really nice granulating blue. So on cold pressed paper like this, it will give you really nice effects in the sky, especially if you have different loads of pigment everywhere. And it's always nice to just cover that up. Oh, need more water. So I'm just going to try and splash a bit and then join up some of those splashes. So I'm actually going to just take a slightly smaller brush to do the joining up. This is a size 8 round as well. And just a bit more of the pigment dropped in around. And I'm going to angle it as well, get a bit more graduation in colour. Okay. We'll see what that looks like. So the next bit I'm going to do is the light side of the building, which I decided earlier was going to be mostly yellow ochre, which is this kind of nice earthy brown, and then quinacridone gold, which is, I think, Daniel. Most of my watercolors are Winsor Newton at the moment. I've actually got loads of Daniel Smiths, which I haven't opened yet. I think quinacridone gold's a Daniel Smith only, and it's just quite a nice, bright, sunshiny colour. I think it's lots of people's favourites. And for this first layer, I'm trying to, especially near our sort of focal point, I'm just trying to be well behaved and leave these bricks and things so that I can add different colours to them later. And then, so I've got that's all yellow ochre. And then if we just drop in bits of the quinacridone gold and let it move around, do its own thing.
You're getting feedback. Amazing what a little color can do. Just that pop. Plus, you have that really fun technique to doing the sky. You're so much braver than I am. I'm afraid to do that.
I used to do the sky at the end, but it does actually make a huge difference. So I've started doing it at the beginning. It also means you can see how bright it is, and you can set the brightness of the rest of the image based on that. Okay. Then as we get sort of further and further away, we are just putting marks down. We're not coloring anything in, just adding a little bit of tone and shape. Tiny bit more of this connecting gold. So in the image, the whole front, this is all in shadow, which I think looked a bit boring. So as part of the artistic license, I'm going to make the shadow sort of bleed across. So hopefully you'll see what I mean when I've done it. So this is just quinacridone gold.
I'm dropping the link again for the mini workshop. 90 minutes, $6. And then you were able to download it afterwards as well.
So this mix here is sepia with, I think it's Indian Red Deep. Sepia is a really nice sort of shadowy color. I think it's really good for urban sketching, even just on its own. It's great for deepening blues and making nice blacks and things. But it's, well, actually an Indian red as well. Indian Red Deep is just the color of bricks, as far as I can work out. So it features in a lot of my painting. Okay, so I'm just trying to drop in a bit more red because I don't want it to be too sort of monotone. Same here. And you can focus the changes in color over these little marks you've made earlier. Try and fill in these little. Again, as we move further away, sort of care less and less about how precise we are, and leaving little white areas is great. I think the mini workshop is all about essentially not painting, leaving white and leaving space and leaving details.
We have 30 minutes left.
Cool. So just left this purposefully white just to highlight the sort of change in building. Just going to come in with this is just the sepia now, and loads of water, and start adding some of these definite shadows in. We don't need to worry about any level of precision here. The other thing is it's quite nice to link. So rather than just having a patch of color on its own, you can link all these shadows. And more sepia, and take them to the trees up here as well. Okay. So while we wait for that to dry, I might add a couple of my bright bits in. So we've got this post box, which is going to be a sort of primary red. This is Scarlet Lake. I'll just put that in. And we'll pop a darker color in at the bottom of the post box. And then this can have an initial bit of red. We're going to use that in a few places. But it's the same principle of, for me, never just use a color in one place. So I've chosen that red because I'm going to use it in some of the bricks. But it just
And which red was that again?
This is Scarlet Lake. So it's just a nice primary red by Winsor Newton, similar to like Cad Red and things like that, which I think are perhaps more common. So I'm going to mix it with a bit of that sepia and loads of water just to add to the distance there. and to give these cars some rear lights. Just mixing that all together to give us all purpley shadow, which we can layer on the previous shadow. Okay. I've missed a little bit of top here. Oh, I've missed a whole bit here. All right, so most of that should be dry now. I'm going to add the roof in. So Payne's Grey is a really nice colour, just to, it's not completely neutral, it's got a sort of blue tinge to it, but it's a very good roof colour. It's a good shadow colour as well. But if I'm using sepia elsewhere, I really like sepia, so that's why I went with that option. I think top of that chimney can just have some colour. Okay. So it's probably time to add these bright greens in, I think. So we've got the two big, I forgot what they're called again, facade awnings, something like that. This is Windsor green, and I think it's the yellow shade, but it's a really vibrant green. Not very good for, I don't like it for foliage because it's just too faint. But for things like this, it's really nice color. And then I'm just gonna, you can see the light in the image coming across, so just a really bit of faint quin gold to sort of glue together. We'll let that dry and see what it looks like. I'm gonna try and just tone that down a bit with a tiny bit of cobalt for this awning, which is definitely in shadow. And I'm going to turn the whole of the front of this building green. So in reality, this bit's got some brickwork, but just trying to drop a bit more pigment in to give texture as it dries. Probably the same up here as well. Even more. Okay, how am I doing for time?
We have about 15 minutes left.
Oh, right. So I don't like doing windows, which is why I've left them to last as well. They're fiddly. So for the windows, the higher up they are, the more they're reflecting the sky. In the image, lots of them have got blinds down, so they become white. Lots of them are the same blue as the sky. So I'm actually going to clean that up. So what we need for this is some of our sky color back, but then also some of our shadow colors, because the lower down, the more it's just reflecting shadows and other buildings. So we've got sepia, Payne's Grey, cobalt blue, and going to try and use those principles just to add this.
Drop the link for the mini workshop again and for our feedback survey. just take a moment, let us know how we're doing. And the mini workshop is there. It's $6. It's far better than a Starbucks coffee any day.
Depends how tired you are, I guess, though.
We did have it in one of the demos, there was a long conversation about how these art classes were far more satisfying than a cup of coffee.
That's good. What I'm doing here is I'm using those three colors, mixing them a little bit, and just trying to give a bit of variation to the windows, whilst trying to be a little bit realistic as well. So, and again, the further we get away, the more it's just little splashes of color and not worrying too much about how much it sits in the window. As we get closer to the focal point, we're trying to have more intense color, a bit more precise. And then just a few of these guys deserve some color as well. Okay. So I'm going to mix sepia and Payne's grey. It gives a slightly more neutral dark color just for these areas, which is definitely dark, not reflecting any sunlight at all.
It's really popping off the page. Some great depth going on.
That is what we're aiming for. Glad it's working, at least to some extent. And then just, this isn't our focal point anymore. We've got the green. Just gonna try and get a hint of green in these windows, just as a way of using this color again to keep it, the whole image more sort of joined together. There's a few areas which I don't want to color much, but could do with texture. So there's a color called buff titanium, which is great for just adding gray. I've mixed it a little bit with our colors here, but it adds a nice bit of texture without sort of jumping off at you too much. It'd be good for this sign as well, where it's in shade. And then this is the inside of the shop, which shop insides tend to have a lot of texture. So quite a light grey initially, and then drop in some Payne's grey, a bit heavier. Conscious of time, this might be risky, but I'm going to try and get the green in here and not have it bleed too much.
We have about 10 minutes. You're fine.
Should be good. Okay.
I know I'm far more relaxed now than while watching you paint.
Broadly speaking, it is very relaxing to paint, isn't
it? Yes. I'm going to drop the link in here again for the mini workshop. That's May 12th.
This is just trying to add some of those shadows. So the size of all these roofs, I've got shadows coming down. Some of these windows as well. I said I'd go back and add a bit of colour there. Okay.
Also putting in the link for our Facebook group. It is a private group. Join it. It's really supportive community. Share your comments, share your artwork on there, and it is not put all over Facebook. It truly cannot say enough about how supportive that community is. So if you have the time and you're on Facebook, join that group. It's worth the time.
So I just changed brush to a size 6. Just to add a few more finer details. Because I use this brush less as well, it's got a much better point than my size 8. And this is the red that I promised we'd use again. I'm just
That's the
go
Scarlet Lake.
Exactly, yeah. Just going around and giving all these sort of divisions a bit of colour. Don't need to colour it all in. You know, it looks like reflections or just a bit of expressive colour, to be honest. I might just, again, for this side, it's supposed to be in shade, so just tone it down with a bit of Payne's grey. Okay, and then I've put in all these details in pen, and these are the same color of brickwork. So we just highlight them, and even where I've not done the ink, these same splashes of color work. And it's nice. I personally like having a few just points of interest. These chimneys aren't actually red in fact, but it's something to just move the eye around the page, having these bright points everywhere. And then I'm just going to mix up a mix of our ochre and the Kringold and a little bit of that red in quite an intense mix to go around adding a few other details.
Going to drop in our feedback survey again and just take a few moments to fill that out for us, please. It is anonymous and takes 2 to 3 minutes tops.
So I'm just trying to put in some brick shapes here, both where I've drawn them, leave some of the ones I've drawn blank, but also in other places. And this is, I've used a few colors. I've used this mix of our 3 brick colors. I'm using here, I think it's a bit of sepia and probably cobalt blue. Just if you mix everything on your palette, you end up with these sort of mid-tony browns, which work quite well for something like this, especially when you're urban sketching and you do just have a load of colors in your palette. And then just adding shadows around where they would naturally be. So all the insides of these frames are in shadow in our image. And just, you can mix up the exact shade of your shadow by just picking out different colors from your palette. Okay, we're getting there. Cool. I also love road markings in paintings, at least. So I often, with whatever yellow I've been using, just come in and get those markings in.
Toby, let's talk a little bit about your 90-minute class.
Yeah.
Have you decided on what you're featuring for that?
So it is a big blue pub surrounded by trees with a really bright blue sky. And the idea is looking at how you can use some really bold colors, but also a lot of white to highlight a focal point. So in this case, the focal point will be the parts of the pub, and then we'll sort of choose where we paint in trees, where we just leave sort of white gaps like this. Yeah, the pub has plenty of windows as well, so I get to torture myself. But it should be a really nice, fun scene. Lots of greens and blues. Does that answer the question all right?
I believe that answers the question. And yes, it's in watercolor.
Yeah, watercolor. It's very much the same techniques. With a bit longer, we probably have a bit more time to be slightly more careful with the colors, but with a very similar effect.
Yes, we have a lot more. That extra 30 minutes makes a difference.
So all I'm going around now is just adding little bits of tone. Can fill in some of these. And I think this doorway needs a bit of colour. You can always look around and just find things which stand up perhaps for the wrong reasons. So I felt like that was a bit bland.
All right, we are coming to our 1 hour mark. I've dropped a couple of links in there for everyone, the 90-minute workshop, our feedback survey, and we've got a question. Is the sketching reference in London? Is that for
This one, yeah.
For this one? Mm-hmm.
Actually, the other one is as well. Yeah. So this one's central London. It's near Russell Square. The other one is in Enfield. So we went for a walk last weekend.
Oh, lovely.
All I'm going to do just quickly. So I'm going to go back in with the bolder fountain pen. It's a bit risky because fountain pens will leak a lot more. And ideally, I'd wait 15 minutes or so. But we can just re-emphasize important lines which have been sort of lost behind a bit of colour. Just add some of the shape back.
Question about, will you go back and paint the trees?
Probably not, to be honest. No, I don't think so. In the image, they're quite dark. They're one of the darker tones. If we actually look at the whole image, they're one of the darker tones. And I think for something like this, if you gave them the actual tone they have in the reference, they would draw the eye hugely. Whereas what you want is something which flows and brings your eye towards the bit you spent time on and that interested you in the first place. So I don't know. Maybe I'd add a little bit of green. I could use this same green just as a splash, but I wouldn't add much more to them.
All right, let's see if we have any more questions come through. I'll let Toby work a little bit more. And got some people already signing up for the workshop, which is wonderful. We'll have some familiar faces. And if there aren't any more questions, comments or needs, we will release everybody and let Toby proceed with his day.
We'll finish there then before I ruin it.
No, it looks lovely. Looks absolutely lovely. Any advice on getting proportions correct?
So I love putting writing in, so I always have stuff like that. So I think one is practice, two is planning a little bit, and also just measuring. So doing your and putting your hand out in front of you. If you're using a photo, you can literally go up to it and measure it if you like. And also, so certainly with buildings, this is why I don't like people, because if you do proportions a bit wrong, it can look really odd. But with buildings, they don't have to be exactly right. I doubt this is exactly right. Just, you know, I think, again, we talked about it last time, I think sometimes you just remove the story from a house because you got the initial sketch wrong and it looks fine as a 4-story house, not a 3-story or 6-story or whatever. So yeah, no huge tips, but mostly just don't worry about it being exactly right.
That's key to giving the permission to use your artistic license and, you know, take a story out.
Exactly, yeah. The other thing I'm just doing now, if anyone's still there, is I got a white gel pen and it adds a nice bit of texture to the windows. You can put writing in the front of awnings and just adding a little bit of texture. The paint's a little bit too wet, so it's not producing huge effect. There we go. I think I'm done. Otherwise, I will do something I can't take away.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Toby, for being here today and giving us this wonderful lesson. Please sign up for the 90-minute workshop. Take a moment, fill out our survey, and absolutely jump into the Facebook group. It's an amazing, supportive community. Thank you all very, very much. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching.
All right. Thank you all.